Okay, so continuing our talk about the carbon cycle, I like this diagram here. It kind of shows the whole thing interconnected together. So it's hard to see here. This is cut off, but there's a tree here. Just imagine the other side of the tree. Okay, wow. You get the idea. Anyway, you can see the leaves here. Okay, so carbon dioxide is in the air. Now, the only way for it to come out of the air, maybe I'll use a different color here, is through photosynthesis. So the carbon dioxide goes into the plant, photosynthesis then converts it into glucose. So you'll notice the glucose is then eaten by the primary consumer, and then it enters, basically as soon as that producer converts it into glucose, it is now entered into the food chain. So the primary consumer will eat it, and of course it will continue on. This is just a very short one. So we have like a tree, a rabbit, and looks like a lynx here. So the rabbit gets its glucose by eating the plant. The lynx will get its glucose by eating the rabbit, right? So here's our little food chain. So how does the rabbit and the lynx get their energy from the food they eat? Through cellular respiration, right? And actually, if you notice, there's even a plant here, a tree, showing that plants also do cellular respiration. All living things do cellular respiration. Okay, now what happens when this rabbit dies, this lynx dies, and this tree dies? Okay, well, when they die, they become what's called detritus. Okay, so detritus is just another way of saying dead organisms. Okay, so what happens when you have a dead organism? You have decomposers. So detritivores is another way of saying decomposers. So essentially the decomposers that are found in the soil start to break down that dead matter. And if you check it out, decomposers will also do cellular respiration. So this is kind of like the natural, this process we just talked about with photosynthesis and cellular respiration is a natural process for the carbon cycle. Now this area that's over here with the burning of fossil fuels, this is based on human activity, right? So naturally, you wouldn't walk in a forest and see, a factory burning fuel. This is something that humans have had an impact on that adds to the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So this is kind of like a nice overall picture of the different processes happening here. Okay, so just to add on to the carbon cycle or the idea of carbon. So remember that carbon can be found in biotic organisms, so like things that are living, and abiotic. So we've already talked about the atmosphere. So carbon dioxide gas is found in the air. Okay, but there are two other sources of carbon that is found in non-living things. So the first is actually within oceans. Okay, oceans or different large bodies of water do have carbon within them. And actually, some of that carbon is used by organisms to make shells. So all shelled life forms, the shell itself is made from a compound called calcium carbonate. So there is carbon within that. And then, of course, the crust, or I should say like essentially soil and rock, okay? A lot of rock material is made up of carbon-based compounds as well. So the one that we're talking about the most here, of course, is the atmosphere, carbon dioxide. But I do want you to know there are other non-living things that do have carbon in them. Okay, and of course, living things have carbon. All living things, all things that are alive, including bacteria, including plants, including decomposers, carnivores, every type of living thing does have carbon, right? Our cells, plant cells and animal cells are all, carbon is essentially the backbone of that. So what happens when these things die, right? So what happens is when living things die, the decomposers will essentially break down that carbon and it will return back into the atmosphere through cellular respiration once again.